Most people have heard of confirmation bias, but there's two other blind spots that may be even more dangerous because most people don't realize they're operating under them. One causes experts to miss things because they're experts. The other convinces us we're being objective when we're not. And if you're a true crime creator or fan thinking, this doesn't apply to me, that's exactly when it probably does. In fact, we as the Idaho4 audience may have been rewarding blind spots all along. Two people can look at the exact same evidence and come to completely opposite conclusions. Both believe they're being objective. Both believe they're following the facts. And both are convinced that the other side is blinded by bias. So who's right? The uncomfortable answer is both sides may be trapped by blind spots they can't see. Once you understand these blind spots, you'll start noticing something in the Idaho4 community that you may have never seen before. The most important blind spots in this case may not belong to law enforcement investigators at all. We talk a lot about confirmation bias in true crime. Confirmation bias is our tendency to notice, remember, and give more weight to information that supports what we already believe, while overlooking information that challenges it. In true crime, confirmation bias is what happens when someone becomes convinced of a theory and then begins viewing every new piece of evidence through that theory. But there are two lesser known blind spots that may be even more dangerous. Expert blindness, which is the tendency for experts to overlook important information because their experience leads them to focus on what they expect to see. In an investigation, expert blindness occurs when experience causes us to focus on the clues we've seen hundreds of times before, making it easier to overlook something unusual or unexpected. And then we have introspection illusion, which is the tendency to believe we understand our own reasoning better than we actually do. It's the mistaken belief that we know exactly why we think the way that we do. Let's start with a concrete example of expert blindness. Expert blindness doesn't just occur when experts overlook information in their own field. It can also occur when expertise in one area creates a false sense of competence in another. I'm an experienced mobile investigator. In the Idaho4 community, I've seen creators confidently evaluate highly technical phone evidence without recognizing the limits of their expertise. A good example is discussions surrounding CSLI data, where some creators base sweeping conclusions on an incomplete understanding of how phones can actually be geolocated. What I love about the illustrative example I'm about to give, whether it came from AI or not, absolutely everything that Pav says is 100% correct. Let's see what he has to say.
Now let's get down to brass tacks on Cy-Ray and what Cy-Ray could know. Once again, his expertise is CSLI. It cannot tell you exactly where somebody was at any point in time.
I'm glad that someone with an audience far larger than mine is saying that CSLI stems from when phones were radios, and it still treats all phones as simply radios, which requires a very inexact way to measure signal strength to determine location.
Admittingly, they don't have timing advance records for Bryan Kohberger. If you study CSLI, you'll know that without a timing advance record that still can't put you in an exact location with all of it, all they can do is really make it look like you're there.
This is also correct, but he's starting to introduce why phone data can't be used to place Mr. Kohberger at the crime scene.
Between 254 and 448, he can't tell you nothing. Absolutely nothing, because there wasn't any tower information. After 448, he could tell you generally where he was based on CSLI, but not exactly because they didn't have timing advance. And when you look at the 6 months prior, when you talk about the trips Kohberger made to Moscow, he cannot tell you that Kohberger was at the King Road house. Not with any legitimacy, because it's impossible based on all of the information that we know.
And this is where we begin to see evidence of expert blindness. The claims that Pav makes may be true for everything that Pav knows about CSLI, but it certainly isn't true for everything we know. Like I said, CSLI treats every phone like a radio, but neither CSLI nor Pav account for specific features on Mr. Kohberger's make and model of phone that make it technically feasible to geolocate that phone between 2:54 and 4:48 a.m., as well as the days leading up to the crime. Galaxy S22 phones begin to assume that they're lost within about 30 minutes of being powered down or having the Wi-Fi turned off. This isn't speculation. It's an established technical fact that really can't be argued about this type of phone. Another established technical fact is that iPhones began to be able to find lost Android phones, starting with iOS 17.5, which released in May of 2024. But you're probably thinking right now, well, the crime occurred in November of 2022. Well, that's where this Android researcher, Josh Hickman, has produced reproducible evidence that iPhones actually could detect lost Androids back as far as iOS 15.3.1, which released in February of 2022.
You have the trigger date when the iPhone logged the data about the Android beacon. You have a series of GPS-generated exact latitudes and longitudes. That's interesting, but again, not really relevant because of the iOS 17.5 requirements that didn't come to pass until 2024. And then two things caught my eye. First, if the device being examined is running any version of iOS prior to 17.5, the key needed to decrypt the encrypted BP list is different. Wait, what do you mean any version prior to iOS 17.5? And then second, these .record files for unwanted trackers go back to at least iOS 15.3.1. Wait, iOS 15.3.1? When did that release? So these files are being logged as far back as February 2022.
There were 6 iPhones in that 1122 King Road house. If Mr. Kohberger were at the scene of the crime or nearby in the days leading up to the crime, then it is at least technically feasible that he could be placed at the crime scene. I have a video that explains all of this research more in depth, but the more important thing to think about right now is how you just reacted to that new technical evidence that you learned, as your reaction is going to become important when we get into the next section. Am I saying that Mr. Kohberger was at the crime scene? No. Am I saying that he's guilty? No. Is it technically feasible to demonstrate that he was at the crime scene outside of using CSLI? Yes. What I also see as an investigator is an otherwise unexplainable opinion of guilt by Cy Ray, who is still bound by an NDA. A Celebrite researcher who alludes to this being what they actually found as part of their work in the case, and an equally surprising guilty plea by Mr. Kohberger based on physical evidence that, and I'm not an expert, for me, I see as somewhat thin. So now we have a problem. We have a technically feasible explanation that could reconcile several otherwise disconnected facts. Occam's razor is the idea that the simplest explanation is likely what happened. The simplest explanation that would cover each of the disconnected facts I see is something that places Mr. Kohberger at the crime scene. Which brings us to introspection illusion. This blind spot doesn't affect people who know they're biased. It affects people who are convinced they're not. Think about your own reaction to the technically feasible phone evidence that I just spoke of. Did you adjust your perspective? Or did you immediately start looking for reasons that the new information couldn't be true? Now imagine a creator who spent hundreds of hours analyzing the Idaho4 case. They sincerely believe that every conclusion they've reached comes directly from the evidence, and they may be right. But introspection illusion asks a different question. How can we as viewers be certain that our favorite creators' audience expectations, video views, reputation, emotional investment, and public commitment to a particular position aren't influencing their conclusions as well? Not because the creator is dishonest, not because they're intentionally misleading anyone, but because human beings are often unaware of the forces shaping their own thinking. In fact, the more sincere a creator is, the stronger the example becomes. This is what makes introspection illusion so dangerous. In fact, it doesn't affect people who know they're biased, it affects people who are convinced that they're not biased. One of the easiest ways to spot an unrecognized blind spot is excessive certainty. When someone consistently tells you they know more than the experts, that they always see things before anyone else, and they've already solved things that trained investigators couldn't, you should become more skeptical, not less. Real expertise doesn't eliminate blind spots. It makes recognizing them even more important. And that brings us to perhaps the biggest lesson from this entire discussion. Whether Bryan Kohberger ultimately gets an appeal, whether you trust law enforcement or distrust law enforcement, whether your favorite creator supports the prosecution or the defense, the truth doesn't care. The truth doesn't care how many subscribers someone has. The truth doesn't care how many videos they've made. The truth doesn't care how strongly they believe in their theory. The truth only cares whether the facts support the conclusion. But conversely, the platform doesn't care about truth. Creators respond to incentives with certainty. Audiences reward certainty by giving consistency. Algorithms reward consistency, which provides confidence. And communities reward that confidence. And over time, these can make it harder for creators to question conclusions they've already committed to publicly. So as viewers, if we want truth, we need to stop giving free passes to creators and to online experts and authors simply because they tell a story and provide consistency that we agree with. We need to question bad assumptions. We need to challenge factual errors. We need to demand that theories explain not just the evidence that support them, but also the evidence that doesn't. Because the goal isn't to defend a narrative. The goal is to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it leads someplace we didn't expect, and especially when it challenges what we think we already know. Take care. If you like my videos and how I present the information, please subscribe and like the video.